So can we handle a short Jai Radha Madhava? Yeah? Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Badadhari Gopi Jana Balaba Giri Badadhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajikacharya Stotha the Shishimada's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Guru Premanamdi Hari Hari Bol. Okay. So, our temple president, Slavas Prabhu, said a number of nice, interesting things in the little talk he gave. And he mentioned about happiness. I don't know if you caught that. He was saying that unless people get knowledge of Krishna consciousness, they won't know how to behave, live their life in a way that will enable them to become happy. So that's actually the subject matter of this afternoon's talk, happiness. We're going to talk about happiness, pleasure, like that. And I'm going to start off by reading a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, and it might not sound at all related to what I just said, but it is, and you'll understand that as the lecture unfolds. But I'm reading from the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 24, and the verse goes, Sanishchayena yoktavya yoga nirvina chetasa sankalpa prabhavan kamams tyaktva sarvam asheshataha manassaivendriya gramam viniyamya samantata. Translation: one should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. And this is Srila Prabhupada's commentary. He says, the yoga practitioner should be determined and should patiently prosecute the practice without deviation. One should be sure of success in the end and pursue this course with great perseverance, not becoming discouraged if there is any delay in the attainment of success. Success is sure for the rigid practitioner. Regarding Bhakti Yoga, Rupa Goswami says, Utsahan nischayat tat karma pavartanat. Sangha tyagat sato vrte sabdir bhakti prasiddhiti. One can execute the process of Bhakti Yoga successfully with full-hearted enthusiasm, perseverance, and determination by following the prescribed duties in the association of devotees and by engaging completely in activities of goodness. As for determination, one should follow the example of a sparrow who lost her eggs in the waves of the ocean. A sparrow laid her eggs on the shore of the ocean, but the big ocean carried away the eggs on its waves. The sparrow became very upset and asked the ocean to return her eggs. The ocean did not even consider her appeal, so the sparrow decided to dry up the ocean. She began to pick out the water in her small beak, and everyone laughed at her impossible determination. The news of her activity the news of our activity spread, and at last Garuda, the gigantic bird carrier of Lord Vishnu, heard it. He became compassionate toward his small sister, and so he came to see the sparrow. Garuda was very pleased by the determination of the small sparrow, and he promised to help. Thus Garuda at once asked the ocean to return her eggs, lest he himself take up the work of the sparrow. The ocean was frightened at this and returned the eggs. Thus the sparrow became happy by the grace of Garuda. Similarly, the practice of yoga, especially Bhakti Yoga and Krishna consciousness, may appear to be a very difficult job, but if anyone follows the principles with great determination, the Lord will surely help, for God helps those who help themselves. Okay, so you might be wondering, what does that have to do with happiness? Well, I'm going to explain, don't worry. Okay, so a few verses before that, in the same chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, he's talking about the perfectional stage of yoga, which is called samadhi or trance. And what he says about that is he describes it, he says, in that stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection, the samadhi, is characterized by one's ability to see the self, capital S, meaning the supersoul, by the pure mind and relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. So, the point that's being made there is that this transcendental happiness is realized through transcendental senses. It's something beyond material happiness. In the purport here, Prabhupada says a little bit more about it. He says, this chit shakti or transcendental pleasure is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. It says this natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by the execution of devotional service, Bhakti Yoga. So, in plain and simple language, we are all after pleasure. You know, we're hankering after pleasure. I mean, why did you come here today? Why did I come here today? Because we're thinking that I'll be happier as a result of going to the Hare Krishna temple than I would be if I didn't go. And it's practically everything we do is motivated. You know, that's the underlying motivation. As a result of doing this, am I going to be more happy or less happy? If we're thinking, well, as a result of doing this, I'll probably be less happy, then we won't do it. And if we're thinking, as a result of doing this, any particular activity, I'll be more happy, we do it. That's a big motivating factor in our psychology. So I'm going to read an excerpt from a lecture that Prabhupada gave, our spiritual master Srila Prabhupada gave when he was here in Los Angeles. This is way back in 1969. The temple at that time was not at this location. It was a few miles away from here, a place called La Cienega Boulevard, which is just kind of going back towards the city a few miles. So anyway, so Prabhupada was talking about this very same subject in the lecture, and he said, we are trying to be happy by artificial means. We are becoming frustrated. But if you actually become situated in Krishna consciousness, reviving your original position, then you become joyful. And he quotes Anandamaya Vyasat, which we heard in that other purport there. He goes on to say, in this La Cienega Avenue, which is where the temple was, there are so many restaurants and so many signboards. Why? He says, because they're advertising. Come on, here is Ananda, here is pleasure. So he goes, so everyone is searching after Ananda, pleasure. But there is different standard. There is a different standard of pleasure. Somebody is trying to find pleasure from the material point of view, and somebody's trying to find pleasure such as speculation, philosophy, poetry, art. Prabhupada just mentions a few there. Many of you might be familiar with this book, Chant and Be Happy. It's a book that we distribute. But in the preface, it sort of elaborates upon that point. It says everyone is searching for pleasure. Some seek pleasure through families, natural and healthy living, successful careers, active social lives, fine gourmet foods, gambling, sports, exercise, politics, the arts, academia, hobbies ranging from mechanics and computer science to drama, philanthropy, welfare work. And then here's this is the real key phrase, literally thousands of other activities comprise man's unending quest for pleasure. See, so we have an unending quest for pleasure, and we're engaging in thousands of activities as a means to that end. It goes on to say millions of people find their happiness in liquor, mood elevators, tranquilizers, or other drugs. It's all part of that unending quest for pleasure. So, Prabhupada goes on to say that everyone is trying to find out this pleasure. They're working hard day and night for that. And that is, how does he put it? That's he says that's our only business. That's meaning that's the only business of the living entity, to find the pleasure. And he says we're accepting all kinds of trouble to find that pleasure. So it's our nature, it's our nature, to seek out pleasure, and it's really ingrained within our psychology. It's like hardwired into us, and there's a reason for that, because Prabhupada's saying here, everyone is trying to find out pleasure. Okay, well, that everyone includes Krishna. It's not only all of us, all the jivas, the living entities that are trying to find out pleasure. We're like this because that's how Krishna is. That's Krishna's nature. Krishna is trying to find out pleasure. Krishna's nature is anandamayo bhyasat. He's always seeking pleasure. Actually, a big part of the reason why, not a big part, the reason why we exist is because Krishna has that pleasure-seeking propensity. I'll read you something. This is from an excerpt from another lecture that Prabhupada gave on this point. God has expanded into so many living entities because he wants enjoyment. He wanted pleasure. He wants enjoyment. Because you will find in the Vedic literature that the nature of God is Sat Chidananda Vigraha, Anandamaya Bhyasat. By nature, he is enjoying, always seeking pleasure. So we must understand that God has expanded himself into so many living entities, us, right? Just for his enjoyment. Now we are meant for his enjoyment. So just like sons, children are meant for satisfying the father. Similarly, this is a common sense affair, that we living entities, we are meant for satisfying the Supreme. That satisfaction of the Supreme can be done by performance of yoga. Okay, it's going to another point. But the point I was making, that we exist because Krishna was desiring enjoyment. Prabhupada explains elsewhere that he actually explains it there, that it's like the psychology of the family here in this world. A couple get together and they think, okay, let's have some children. Why? So increase our pleasure. The children, we will love the children and they'll love us back, and that'll be nice. That'll be a nice situation. So that thinking originates in Krishna. Krishna's expanding as the living entities in hope of enjoying like a reciprocal loving relationship with them. See? That's the motive behind Krishna's expanding as the living entities. So this quest, this unending quest for pleasure, it's kind of, as I said, it's hardwired into us. It's part of Krishna's psychology, and our psychology is just a reflection of Krishna's psychology. We're thinking like that because Krishna originally thinks like that. So it's part of our, as I said, psychology, and we really can't get away from it. In another lecture, Prabhupada explains how it's not optional. It's not like, well, it'd be nice to be really happy, but I don't want to bother. I'm content. I'm satisfied to be the way No, you can't delete it. You can't remove it from your psychology. Here's an excerpt from a lecture where Prabhupada says, every living entity is seeking after pleasure. That is his nature. See, it's our nature. You cannot stop. He says, just like a child is seeking after some enjoyment, he's breaking something. But he's breaking, he's simply enjoying that breaking. Similarly, we do not know what is enjoyment in this material concept of life. We are breaking and building. In your country, I have seen several places. Nice building is dismantled, and again, in that very place, another building is raised. You see? Breaking and building. Oh, this building is old, break it. The same childish play, simply wasting time and energy of this, the valuable time and energy of this human form of life. Breaking and building. This motor car is useless, and he says another 69 model. I guess he gave this class in 68. And thousands of people are engaged in that 69 model. In essence, breaking and building, just like the child. So unless one has got better engagement in Krishna consciousness, surely they will be engaged in this breaking and building, childish engagement. So point being that you can't get away from it. You know, it's no question of like, well, you know, I'll just kind of be happy with whatever. No, by nature, we're kind of pushed. You know, we're being pushed towards, driven is the word I was looking for, driven towards seeking out pleasure. And the point that's being made here is that unless we find a higher pleasure, a pleasure in spiritual life, it's Prabhupada just kind of quoted one line from a very famous verse in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Vishaya venivartante nihahadasya dehina rasavarjam asopiyasya param drishtvanavartate. It says that the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment. You might restrict yourself, right? It says, but ceasing such engagement, but doesn't work. Okay, but there's a ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, one becomes fixed in consciousness. So the point that's being made there is that you can try to restrain yourself from, you know, trying to enjoy, but it doesn't work. There's another verse I'll quote in the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita where it goes, Nahi kaschit shanamapi jatu tishtati karma krit. Nahi kaschit shanamapi jatu tishtati karma krit. Hang on. That's why I have the book. Okay. Oh yeah. Karyatehi avashakama sarva prakriti jayaguna. That all men are forced to act helplessly according to the impulses born of the three modes of material nature. No one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So in other words, once again, it's not optional. And in the purport to that verse, Prabhupada says, unless one is engaged in the good works of Krishna consciousness, in other words, unless you're trying to, you're engaged in devotional service, you're trying to find your happiness in, executing Bhakti Yoga, performing Bhakti Yoga, then he says you're going to be forced to engage in occupations dictated by the illusory energy. See? So in other words, if you don't connect, if you don't excavate that connection, if you don't plug in to the spiritual energy, the spiritual nature, by engaging in devotional service, then you're forced to, I'll just take care of that, sorry about that. You're forced to engage in activities dictated by the illusory energy, which won't enable you to be happy, which will just cause you to become further entangled in the material energy and take birth again and again and again here in this material world. So it's, once again, it's something that we have to do. We have to seek out engagement in devotional service and get the pleasure there. Otherwise, we're forced to engage in material activities. So here's another excerpt from a lecture where Prabhupada talks about, because I've been saying we have to engage in devotional service, and a very important aspect of devotional service is association. And it's so powerful that Prabhupada makes the point in this lecture that simply by association, here it is, simply by association, we can experience this higher taste. I'll just read it. He says, the name Krishna means highest pleasure. It is confirmed that the Supreme Lord is the reservoir, the storehouse of all pleasure. We are all hankering after pleasure. Anandamaya Briyasat. The living entities of the Lord, because we are full of consciousness, therefore our consciousness is after happiness. The Lord is also perpetually happy, and if we associate with the Lord, cooperate with Him, take part in His association, then we also become happy. Oh, it looks like I didn't print something that I meant to, but anyway, I'll just explain it to you. Prabhupada goes on from there, gives the examples. It's just like if you associate with criminals, he says you don't have to try to become a criminal. I thought that was a very interesting example. He said automatically, if you're hanging out with people who are criminals, it's just a matter, in due course of time, it's just, you'll become a criminal. You kind of like develop that mentality. So he's making the point in this lecture, in the same way, if you associate with, people who are alive in spiritual life, spiritually enlivened and happy, then that rubs off. That's the expression. Things rub off. If you associate with criminals, that mentality rubs off on you. If you associate with people who are, advanced in devotional service, that rubs off on you. The number one person to associate with is Srila Prabhupada himself. An advanced devotee in general, but Srila Prabhupada himself. And the number one way to associate with an elevated devotee is hearing. Hearing. Prabhupada started this movement from just speaking words. Prabhupada came here in 1965, and he started preaching in 1966. And just on the basis of the sound vibrations that came from Prabhupada's mouth, this movement, people became inspired. People became inspired to take up devotional service. See, so that's how it works. And it happened before it could happen again. Those same words are still available. If anybody's interested, aside from Prabhupada's books, there's a website called Vanipedia, and it has all of Prabhupada's lectures on it. And it's a very good practice. It's very practical, very easy to do, and very beneficial. Is you just go to that website and you can, pick out. You can start right at the beginning and chronologically listen to all the different lectures, or you can pick out I want to listen to the Chaitanya Charitamrita lectures, or the Nectar Devotion lectures, or whatever. But the idea is, if you hear from the pure devotee, then the same thing that happened 50 plus years ago can happen again, at least in your life. That you'll be inspired. You'll be inspired, but what you hear Prabhupada saying. It'll help you a lot in your, in your spiritual life and your attempt to become engage in devotional service and become Krishna conscious. So, let's see, was there anything else here? Okay, so that's the academic part of the class. All right. Now, I started off by reading this, a translation and purport about determination, and there was that one paragraph. Hopefully, you remember just from a few minutes ago about that sparrow that laid its eggs on the shore of the ocean, and the ocean, obviously the high tide came in and swept them away. And so. A very important part of getting this higher taste, this param drishvan of artate, is just, you got to desire it. You have to have it, you actually have to want spiritual life. In a purport in the 4th chapter, Prabhupada explains the process of devotional service, and I'll just read a couple sentences from that. It says, in the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization, and that will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. And in the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master. So it says here, but in the beginning, you have to have a desire for self-realization. So that desire is important, because ultimately, Krishna is within our heart, and he is responding, or he's reciprocating with our desire. See, so, and here's an example of how a living entity, because it had a very intense desire, it got reciprocation from a higher authority. The sparrow, I think it's very interesting. It's meant to be taken literally. The sparrow was desperate. It was like going nuts, basically. It was just desperate to get its eggs back. Of course, it's as Prabhupada describes here in this little story, it's impossible, to dry out the ocean by taking one beakful of water at a time from the ocean. But Garuda, and here's some key words it says here. He became compassionate towards his small sister bird. See, that's what happened. Garuda was aware of the activities of the sparrow, and he became compassionate towards that sparrow, and it says here he promised to help. And then, of course, by the grace of Garuda, the eggs were returned. So we're in the same exact position. We're in the same exact position as that sparrow. We're helpless. We're just like one little human being, on the face of the earth. We're, influenced by under the control of the three modes of material nature. Krishna says in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, this divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is insurmountable, Dhirachaya, but one who surrenders unto me can easily cross beyond it. See? So that's our position. We're like bound right now. We're bound by these three modes of material nature. And like the sparrow was, so in a helpless situation. But if we very sincerely try to engage in devotional service, like intensely, like almost desperately, like the sparrow was doing, then we will attract the attention. We will attract the attention, not necessarily of Garuda, but we'll attract the attention of our spiritual master and the predecessor acharyas, and they will become compassionate towards us. And when they become compassionate towards us, then Krishna will release us from the control of the material energy. That's how it works. Prabhupada says here, I'll read that a couple sentences from that purport of that verse. Yeah, it says here. Another meaning of guna is rope. It is to be understood that the conditioned soul is tightly tied by the ropes of illusion. Okay, that's us. We're tight at the moment. We're tightly tied by the ropes of illusion. A man bound by the hands and feet cannot free himself. He must be helped by a person who is unbound. Because the bound cannot help the bound, the rescuer must be liberated. Therefore, only Lord Krishna or his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, can release the conditioned soul. Okay? So that's the first point we have to understand. We can't wiggle our way out of this one. Even if you're kind of like a Houdini or something like that, you're not going to be able to kind of work your way out of the mode. No, only you're bound, and the bound can only be released by somebody who's not bound. The rescuer must be liberated. So we need the help of the spiritual master, and who can release the conditioned soul. It says here, without such superior help, one cannot be freed from the bondage of material nature. Devotional service to Krishna consciousness can help one gain such release. And here it comes. Krishna, or as we just heard, his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, Krishna, being the Lord of the illusory energy, can order this insurmountable energy to release the conditioned soul. That's the only way. Krishna has to order the illusory energy to release the conditioned soul. He orders this release out of his causeless mercy. Same thing we heard before, his compassion on the surrendered soul, and out of his paternal affection for the living entity who is originally a beloved son of the Lord. Therefore, surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord is the only means to get free from the clutches of the stringent material nature. So we have to be following the footsteps of that sparrow and become really determined, intensely determined to achieve the favor of the guru, the spiritual master, and the predecessor acharyas. And they become aware of that. In the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that, in the 15th chapter, he says, I am situated in everyone's heart, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. And in the 10th chapter, he says, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. So those who are intensely desiring and really trying to engage in devotional service, I give them inspiration from within them, within their heart, how to do it favorably. And then he goes on to say, out of compassion for them, I, who am dwelling within their heart, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. See? So that's how it works. Krishna can understand when we're really sincerely and seriously trying to engage in devotional service, and he reciprocates. And reciprocation comes in the form of, as we just heard, ordering the illusory energy to release the conditioned soul from the bondage of the illusion, three modes of material nature, and elevating us to the spiritual platform where we will actually experience real happiness. That the happiness that I was reading about at the beginning of the class. How did it go? Sukam adyantikam yatad buddhigrayam atindriya. That the happiness it's beyond the three modes of material nature. It's not material happiness. It's a spiritual happiness, which it's actually our original natural condition, and it's what we'll experience when we rise above these three modes of material nature as a result of receiving the mercy of the spiritual master and ultimately Lord Sri Krishna. It's like if you're in an airplane and it's on the ground, and it's like a really, Prabhupada gave this example. It's an overcast day. It's really cloudy and rainy, but the air pilot decides, okay, it's safe. Let's go for it, and it starts taxiing down the runway. But it's as I said, it's completely overcast. It's pouring rain, but the plane just kind of just goes right down and takes off and starts going up. And it might even get rough, even rougher. It's a lot of turbulence as it's going up through the clouds. But at some point, if it just keeps climbing, it gets above the clouds and then fly the friendly skies of, not United, but Krishna. It's once you get above those modes of material nature. There's a verse in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita goes, Mam chayo vyabhachadena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati chaitan brahma bhuyaya kopate. That if one engages in full devotional service, it's just the same way of saying, different way of saying the same thing. One engages in full devotional service and doesn't fall down in any circumstance, sticks with it, doesn't deviate. He at once transcends the three modes of material nature and comes to the level of Brahman, or the spiritual platform. As you get above the clouds. Once you're above the clouds, it's no rain, it's just clear, sunny skies, you see. So once we get past these modes of material nature, then we'll experience this natural ananda. Ananda is the Sanskrit word means bliss. It's different from the Sanskrit word sukha, which means material happiness. It's a transcendental spiritual happiness. It's actually our natural condition, and that's what we'll experience that when we actually engage seriously in devotional service, and by the mercy of Krishna and the spiritual master transcend the three modes of material nature. So I'll stop there. Does anybody have any question? Okay. Does anybody have any comment? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that transcendental happiness also in other, Christians and other kinds of religions, they can experience that too.
Oh, that's a comment. Yeah, that is possible, because there's a Sanskrit phrase, Bhava Grihi Janardhan. And what it means is that Krishna, he accepts the feeling. Bhava means the feeling, the spiritual emotion. Grahi means to grab. Janardhan is the name of Krishna within the heart. So Krishna within the heart, he grabs the feeling. So Krishna can understand the sincerity of any person, and he can reciprocate. Once Prabhupada was asked by one of his disciples, is Bob Dylan God conscious? And Prabhupada said, his sincerity is his God consciousness. So in other words, it's not a disqualification. This is the best. That's why we're here as devotees of Krishna, because we feel this is the best philosophy, the best process, etc. But there are people who aren't members, practicing Bhakti Yoga, but who are sincere, and Krishna can understand their sincerity, and he's going to reciprocate with that. They could possibly experience some spiritual pleasure, and Krishna will help them. But I will say that he'll help them, and eventually they will come to Bhakti Yoga. If not in this lifetime, in a future lifetime. Because, I mean, I didn't mention it in this class, but this is very much a multi-life process. So, and Krishna says in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavam mam papajate vasudeva savarmiti samahatma sadurlabha, that after many births and death, one is actually in knowledge, surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very, very rare. So somebody, could be sincere and maybe not come to Krishna consciousness in this lifetime. Krishna will help them. Krishna may allow them to experience some spiritual pleasure. Krishna will make arrangements for them to come to, ultimately, eventually, Bhakti Yoga, if not in this lifetime, in a future lifetime. That would be my response to your reflection. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Anything? Yeah, not that. Okay. It starts with coming and associating, come to the temple, associate with the devotees, read Prabhupada's books, because then by reading Prabhupada's books, you'll be able to understand what the qualities are, what you're looking for. Like, how do you know how to buy a diamond? Well, you got to study up on it. You have to learn what a diamond is, what it looks like, there's some ways to test how many carats it is and so forth and so on, So in the same way, you have to become knowledgeable as to what are the qualifications of a bona fide spiritual master. And if you come and associate, with the devotees here at the temple, you'll hear different people speak, and somebody will inspire you. You'll be inspired by some person you hear speaking, and then you can kind of match and you see, well, you learn more about that person. Do their, aside from their speech, does the way they live, how they're conducting their life, does it kind of match up with the descriptions in the book of how a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to behave like that? And if you find that's the case, then you could, try to kind of make some relationship with that person and just, it's one step after the other. Actually, you don't have to look far. If you go into the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, starting with text 54, it's probably the first description we get of some of the qualities of a bona fide spiritual master. Arjuna asked this question. He says, "O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit and how does he act?" That's text 54. And then from 55 to 72, which is the end of the chapter, so that's the next, almost 17 verses, is a description of the qualities of a transcendental person. So you can study that, and that'll get you started. But basically, all throughout the books, there's just one description after another of, what are the qualities, the symptoms of a person whose consciousness is merged in transcendence, who's liberated, who's on the no longer influenced under the control of the modes of material nature, who's on the transcendental platform. So you just become familiar with that and take advantage and try to hear from different, people who are spiritual masters and see which one inspires you the most. That would be off the top of my head. Thank you for your question. Anybody else? Yeah. Sorry?
You did talk about the tools, like what you should do that you can get more connected to Krishna.
Yeah.
What are the tools which might can take you away from what should be aware?
Well, Prabhupada gave us 4 regulative principles. He used to describe those as the 4 pillars of sinful life. No illicit sex, no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling. So those activities are, really materialistic, and if you engage in those activities, it makes it a lot harder to come to a spiritual platform. It's just like trying to light a fire and pouring water on it at the same time. If you're trying to light a fire, you want your fuel to be nice and dry, but if you're kind of pouring water on your dry wood while you're trying to ignite it at the same time, it's going to make it very much more difficult, if not impossible. So those were Prabhupada gave us, and he kind of felt like if somebody did that, then everything else will follow. No illicit sex, no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling. Chant 16 rounds. That's what everybody's supposed to promise at the time of initiation. So those are particularly significant. Yeah? Anybody else? Okay, over there, yeah. Yeah.
Is that based on karma? Because two people can experience the same karma, but the degrees of happiness is different in the same event. How does that work?
Yeah, sukha is a product of karma. You know, according to one's karma, one will experience dukkha or sukha. Dukkha means distress. Sukha is material happiness. Dukkha is the opposite. And actually, I'll read you something. Actually, thank you for asking that question because I had something about that. There's a lecture Prabhupada gave about Go Beyond Your Destiny, it was titled. And he gave it in Bombay, 1974. He said, everyone is working in this Bombay, in the city, Bombay City. A very poor man is also in Bombay City, and a very rich man is also there. Both of them have the same facilities to work, but we find that one man is working very hard day and night. Hardly he is getting his morsel of food. Another man, simply by sitting down in the office, is earning thousands and thousands of dollars. Why? Because the difference of the field of activities, the body is different. Because one has got a certain type of body, his destination is already there. Karmana daivanetana jantor deho papajate. We can study this thing that somebody is living in a poor slum and another man is living in a very palatial building. He says, and he's thinking, I shall not live in this poor slum hole, but it's not possible because the destiny is there. The body is made according to our past karma, and that is called destiny. And here's the point. Your happiness and distress is according to the body. It's already settled up. It is not possible by natural way to improve or make it any worse. It is already settled up. See, so it might sound like, wow, that's pretty, what's the word? Yeah, condemning and not very hopeful, you know. But there is, Prabhupada says, and I noticed the key word there, he says, it is not possible by natural way to improve, but there's, by the natural course of events. If you just go out there and you say you're in a distress, you know, you're poor, and you're thinking, okay, I'll work really hard. According to this, no, that's not what'll help. But it's stated elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, if you engage in devotional service, Krishna says in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Sarvadhamam parityajam, and this is the most famous verse of the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadhamam parityajam mame kam saranam vraja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshasyami masucha, that abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. I will protect you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Notice, we can't change our karma. No matter how hard we try, we can't change our karma, but Krishna can change your karma. Krishna will change the karma of somebody who's very sincerely trying to engage in devotional service. Krishna can manipulate, he can tweak it, he can change karma and his karma in such a way that it will not be something that will, make it harder for you or prevent you from engaging in devotional service. He can do that. There's another verse in the Brahma Samhita that goes, Karmani, just a phrase, Karmani nidrahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam. That same point, that Krishna is in control. We're under the control of karma, but karma is under the control of Krishna. And if we surrender to Krishna, Krishna can actually change things. He can manipulate your karma in such a way that, not that you'll become the next Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos or whatever that other guy's name is, but he'll manipulate your karma in such a way that it's not going to be an obstacle or an impediment, an insurmountable obstacle or an insurmountable impediment in your attempt to advance in devotional service. That makes sense? Thank you. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. I didn't see the whole, but whatever I caught was good. Thank you.